Welcome back. It's time now for your business news. We've got Melissa Tichy in studio with us. So, Melissa, what's happening in the world of business?
Well, we're talking about youth unemployment, and those levels are still alarmingly high. And that was one of the talking points at the second Investment Roundtable of the National Youth Development Agency. Now, our reporter is Aviwe Mtila is at this event, and we will be speaking to him now. Good afternoon, Aviwe.
Good afternoon, Melissa, and of course the session has just joined in once more. You know, hearing these discussions here is quite disheartening. One of the panelists here was saying just how the youth themselves are in a state of hopelessness. Given the escalating numbers of the unemployment rate, you know that almost 2/3 of the youth is currently unemployed, and if you are to look at the efforts that's needed from the youth just to get a job, you'll find out that you need about 1,000 rand per day if you are to actively seek help. Seek a job, I beg your pardon. It's one of those issues that the NYDA, that's the National Youth Development Agency, is trying to tackle here as it's gathered youth at the hotel. Yeah, let's in fact speak to the deputy chairperson here to find in on some of those interventions. Thank you for joining us at eNCA, but we're hearing these challenges, and as the NYDA, what are the biggest challenges that come to you on a daily basis?
Thank you very much for having us this afternoon. And I think, as you would have mentioned, that the biggest challenge that we face at this point is that almost 2/3 of young people are not actively involved in any sector, whether employment, education or training. And this is a moment for us as the National Youth Development Agency to drive uninterrupted attention towards resolving the challenges that young people in the country face. And that is why we're having this investment roundtable. And the theme speaks to investing in human capital, that there needs to be a skills revolution in South Africa. We need to be able to ensure that young people respond to the immediate needs of the economy.
And how do we ensure that? Because the economy itself is not growing. You're getting graduates that are currently unemployed in their huge numbers. You have youth that's unemployed. How are you then tackling these challenges?
The National Youth Development Agency prides itself in supporting startups. And it is our belief, and I think research also supports us, that actually SMMEs are one of the greatest areas for employment creation. And that is why we're having the conversation that how do we ensure that we increase pool funding towards SMMEs to ensure that they can be able to create more employment and also be able to employ more young people. But also we're taking the conversation even further outside of the borders of the country. One of the fundamental areas that we're focusing on today is actually trade and how you can be able to ensure that there is industrialization that is speeded up in South Africa so that we can be able to take advantage of the opportunities brought by the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement.
And how do we then tackle the big elephant in the room? That's the red tape. We do know, the struggles of finances where you don't have the money to actually apply for a job. There's a struggle with access to funding for these SMMEs. And you hear, that South Africa has all these wonderful policies, but the implementation is not there. How do you then bridge this gap?
One of the areas actually that was brought about by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the DDG, she spoke about the fact that you've got a lot of funding pathways in the South African government, but all of them are facing different directions. So you've got the NYDA doing something different, you've got CIFA and CEDA doing something different. So we need to pull all of those funds together so that you are able to ensure that even when you put processes in place, you standardize them, but also bear in mind that young people, for example, would not have collateral to have a 2 million rand loan. And that's where we come in to say, how can we then remove some of the barriers that exist towards accessing some of these financial instruments that already exist? And I think that's the conversation that we must also intensify as young people to hold government accountable. I think the President in the State of the Nation address did commit to lessening red tape. I think there is a team in the presidency that is actually dealing with red tape in particular. But then as young people, we then need to further the conversation to say, as young people, this is our status and this is how we believe funding instruments can be set up to ensure that we can be able to have access to them.
All right, and inequality, maybe lastly, how do we then deal with the issue of inequality in the most unequal society in the world?
It's a very difficult one. I mean, South Africa has got one of the highest Gini coefficients, but I think that is the work that government needs to be deliberate about. And when you're speaking about funding young people, you're speaking about empowering them to ensure that you bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I think it's a policy issue that we need to ensure that we insist that there is rapid work that is done to ensure that we resolve the inequalities in South Africa.
All right, thank you very much. Karabo Mohale, that's the Deputy Chair of the NYDA Board, of course, as the second investment roundtable is underway currently here. The youth trying to find solutions for the youth in what is actually battering when it comes to unemployment, knowing that almost 2/3 of the youth in South Africa, which are in the majority when it comes to the population, are unemployed.
Thank you so much, Aviwe. That was our senior reporter, Aviwe Mtila, at the second investment roundtable hosted by the National Youth Development Agency. And this roundtable is aimed at accelerating much-needed investments across various industries, specifically for the youth. But more on that later.